That'll be the end of that track then, just as well I turned up just in time. So, that was a bit spooky, wasn't it?
It was very spooky indeed, yes. I thought it was going to be first and last and always to start, which would have been absolutely sublime, but there you go. We can have that a bit later.
I think that's the one you were supposed to have. That's Sisters of Mercy and Walk Away. And that's the one I had lined up. You didn't know. You mentioned their name. But I can vouch absolutely that was not an inside job like 9/11 might.
So did you say you've been talking to the Sisters of Mercy, or were you joking?
Well, I've been talking to certain people. That's for afterwards. I want you to tell the people before the end of the evening why you left MI5 and why you blew the whistle. In fact, I think you ought to explain briefly why you joined MI5, because they might be wondering that. And then briefly why you left MI5.
Yeah, I joined to stop terrorism. I've got to say, I've got to be the most unlikely person ever to work for MI5, and it was one of those kind of wacky things happened in my life. Up until that point, I'd been an activist and a journalist, and I found myself working for MI5. I didn't apply to work there. I applied to an ad which I thought was journalism, and I found myself in this very strange, unmarked building discussing the ethics of intelligence with somebody who looked like the very epitome of an intelligence officer with some swept-back silver hair, a chalk pinstripe suit. And I was attracted to joining the service because, one, I'm a nosy Parker and I wanted to actually see it for myself. That was part of it, obviously, but, you know, I wanted to protect the country, and I joined the service, and most of the work I did there was in defence of terrorism and bringing men of violence to justice, and I think that is good spiritual work. But obviously where I drew the line was when MI6 funded Al-Qaeda. In the detail of this, I was briefed on this operation all the way through. I was told about it first in summer 1995. Just before Christmas 1995, I was told by my opposite number, David Watson, names were in the public domain, that he'd given $40,000 to a group, to an agent they'd nicknamed Tunworth, who was leading a group of Islamic terrorists, basically. And I'm pointing out to them, obviously, that by this point MI5 had set up a section to deal with the new threat from organisations like Al-Qaeda. So why were they giving money to them to try and bump off Colonel Gaddafi? Because Colonel Gaddafi, at that point, had renounced terrorism, so it didn't make any logical sense. And I didn't think it would happen. I actually thought the MI6 officers were, as usual, overplaying things, playing this kind of James Bond game. And about 2 months later, though, March 1996, I read some GCHQ reports that were reporting on an incident in Libya where they'd used exactly the same MO as had been proposed in a report to attack Gaddafi. And I checked this out with Watson. He said, yes, that was our man, he did it. And I pointed out, well, he didn't, because Gaddafi survived, but nevertheless innocent people died. And I was not in the services to be involved in terrorism in any way. And so I resigned, and that was what made me want to go on the record. I'd also seen other things going wrong. I'd seen them bugging a Guardian journalist on the basis of inaccuracies and no information. I'd seen them letting a Libyan terrorist into the country who'd set up a terrorist network here. I knew they were letting in Al-Qaeda members, even though they knew Al-Qaeda were a threat. In the short of it, they couldn't do their jobs, and what they really were was a kind of smokescreen, really, to try and impress people that we were always under attack. You know, we did some ethical work there against real terrorists, but ultimately, once you've got an organisation funding terrorism out without the knowledge of the government as well, that's immoral, it's illegal, they killed people, they should be put on trial for it, that's the way it works. But I also defended the Lockerbie evidence. People have questioned whether Lockerbie evidence is real, and I had what can only be described as a conspiracy theorist wet dream. I actually looked through all the files that MI5 had on Lockerbie, and I'm absolutely convinced they got the right two guys. Lamin Fima only got off on a technicality, basically. And if people are involved in bombing people and killing 270 people, I think they, in a sense, deserve to spend the rest of their life behind bars. You know, as imperfect as man's justice is, that would see a clear example of where it's been done.
So are you saying they should all go out and get drunk if they should all be behind bars?
I'm also saying as well that if people repent, of course, we should then, if they genuinely repent, we should then free them. Of course, that would be the other thing. And this is what my message is, one of unconditional love. It's to say to the Zionists, look, we can show you a better way of life. We're not in the business of retribution or revenge. We're actually about saying that it's better if you live in unconditional love and share things. You people have far more than you need. There's people in the world who are dying because they don't have enough, and we need to correct that imbalance, you know.
What about the drug running in the world? What's that all about?
Well, I say that's all about funding the false flag terrorist operations. You've got to have lots of money to fund these operations, and they're doing them, obviously, sometimes with people in organisations like MI5 and MI6, but those organisations aren't directing them. So you need people to direct it and things like that. You've got to pay those people. And the only way you can get that money is to have an industry as large as the illegal drugs trade. Now, to give you an idea of how big it is, the biggest turnover in this country of any business is the tourist industry, and that's 8 billion. But of course the tourist industry has high street shops, it has massive advertising campaigns, it has massive internet presence, everybody thinks about the holidays all the time, so they've got all that going for it. But the illegal drugs trade in this country is also worth 8 billion. That has no advertising, no shop fronts and so on. So that gives you an idea of how much money is swilling around for them to be using.
Well, after the next advert